Bloomberg Tech is live from the heart of Silicon Valley with Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
This is Bloomberg Tech. Coming up, Meta agrees to settle the landmark teen social media trial and pay up to $18 billion over 10 years. Plus, NVIDIA reports after the closing bell today. We're going to discuss what investors will be looking for, including more than $80 billion in data center revenue alone. And we stick with data centers as we're joined by Southern Company CEO Chris Womack to discuss the AI boom going and its impact on the American grid. There is a top story out there today, and that is Meta agreeing to settle a landmark teen social media trial. Shares higher but off session highs. The company will pay up to $18 billion over 10 years. It will impose new restrictions on young users, including nighttime blocks and daily use limits for under 18s. We're going to discuss all of that and a lot more later in the hour with one of the 29 state attorneys general that sued Meta, West Virginia Attorney General J.B. McCuskey. NVIDIA reporting today after the closing bell. This is the big one. Let's bring in Bloomberg Semiconductor reporter Ian King. This is the catalyst for the market. The expectation is this will be good. We will want to hear if it will continue to be good for a long time to come.
Yeah, I mean, there's no concern about the numbers, at least in the short term. We're looking, $93 billion in revenue for the quarter, going to $104 billion next quarter. So nobody's concerned. We're almost doubling year over year. All of the demand signals are strong, but of course, the other factors have already crept into people's thinking.
You know, that would be in the fiscal third quarter, based on what NVIDIA guides, its first ever quarter in excess of $100 billion of revenue. But the bar is so high. What are some of the questions that NVIDIA, Jensen Huang and other execs are likely to get?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. This is a company that in one quarter is going to have more revenue than its next nearest two rivals combined in a year. And yet that isn't enough, right? What we want to know now is what's going on with the balance sheet. What will be the fallout from all of these deals it's done? How much money is it on the hook for?
So-called circular financing or not?
Yes, exactly.
Bloomberg's Ian King is going to have a very busy afternoon. Thank you very much indeed, and I'm sure we'll hear from you throughout the day. I want to get more on the expectations for NVIDIA. Jordan Klein is tech sector specialist and managing director at Mizuho Securities. There is a range of estimates on the street, right? $92, $95 billion on the high end. Does it even matter if they hit that high end?
Oh, it always matters, Ed. I think it's become kind of predictable in terms of NVIDIA beating and raising. So getting at or above the high end of that kind of $3 billion beat and $3 billion plus guide above, I think it's very important if the stock's going to have a hope of going higher and potentially sparking a bit of a rebound in some of these semiconductor stocks in the near term.
The guide for the fiscal third quarter, the period we're in right now, the street on a consensus basis, $104 to $105 billion. I was reading your note, and you think that even if they go way beyond that, guiding to $108, $109 billion, that might not be enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the question is that, like I said, they've traditionally exceeded the guide by about $3-4 billion. And I think that would put you at at least 108 to 110 for the total revenue. I'm kind of hearing that anything at a 110 or above gets the stock moving up very quickly. In that 108 to 110 range, I think it's fine. But as you've noticed, the stock really hasn't moved a lot the day after the last 4 to 5 earnings. And so I would say that to really spark a rebound, it's going to take a little bit more probably than you're traditionally seeing to kind of get people excited of this could be a stock that could start to really outperform. I mean, it's up 12-13% this year, but keep in mind, semis are up 65%. So again, I think a lot of people are watching this are there going to be some catalysts and signals that they're going to give us that could suggest the beat and raises could be bigger in the next couple of quarters versus what they've been over the last 12 months.
So there is a technology story here, which is Vera Rubin, and the question of whether Vera Rubin becomes a catalyst, right? Because the latest generation accelerated computing platform is in full production, but did not ship in the July quarter. And the adoption of that generation to generation shift how closely are the phone calls that you're taking modeling for that? You know, the people whose notes cross your desk?
Well, that's a good question. They're right at the beginning of this next product cycle called Vera Rubin. Customers are anxiously waiting to get their hands on that product, and it'll start shipping in modest volumes in this October quarter, but really kick in the following quarter that ends in January and into the first part of next year. So again, I think the demand well exceeds supply. They're going to get questions around the supply chain and their ability to ramp volume production. There might be some questions and debates like, would the demand shift to this newer, higher performance Vera Rubin take away any of the demand for the existing Blackwell product? I think demand is so good and supply is so constrained that people are going to buy whatever they can get their hands on.
Right.
And it's not going to be really an issue.
Well, so many people would point to the high utilization rate and pricing of older, obsolete generation compute, right? A100, not even Hopper, and say, well, you know, Blackwell transitioning to Vera Rubin, it all gets used. Jensen Huang loves big round numbers, Jordan. So to finish, what would he have to say about the next few years, a multi-year horizon of the addressable market, or in aggregate, what Blackwell to Vera Rubin will book for NVIDIA over a longer time horizon?
Well, see, that's kind of the debate that I have, and I get the feedback or questions from investors is, will he raise kind of the order backlog, order book, you know, number that they've given in the past for the next couple years to some higher number that would get investors excited? The feedback I'm getting is that they won't use this earnings call tonight as a forum to raise their longer term projections. They will wait probably until their October GTC event, which I believe this year is taking place in Germany, to probably give a longer term update on those forecasts. So again, I don't want to get people too excited, but I think you're probably not going to get it tonight, although he's going to sound great. I just think that comes probably at a different event, which is more product and customer related, and that comes in October. So I think the catalysts are still great. You're just not going to get some bazooka tonight that causes everyone to go out and rush to buy immediately. But I still love the setup into the end of this year.
Jordan, there has been souring sentiment of Americans towards data centers. Do you expect anyone to ask Jensen Huang about that, or NVIDIA to say anything about that? Yeah, I mean, it's really hard for him to speak specifically to some of these state and local governments who want to restrict or limit the build out of data centers. I think what he's been an advocate and a champion for AI since day one. And I think what he's going to speak to is the benefits, the efficiencies, the cost savings, and the value that AI brings to individuals, employees, and the economy broadly. And, you know, I think they're doing all they can to soften some of the concerns. But again, you know, there's only so much they can do other than help kind of finance and facilitate the build out of these. But they're not the ones actually building them. So again, that comes down to the hyperscalers and what they're willing to concede to the governments or the constituents that live in these regions who are worried about the risks associated with these data centers. So I don't really know what he can say other than there's so much benefit we're getting from AI. It's worth any of these, you know, maybe potential perceived concerns to get those benefits. Jordan Klein's the tech sector specialist and managing director at Mizuho Securities. Thank you so much. Coming up in the show, West Virginia Attorney General J.B. McCuskey joins us for an exclusive interview on Meta's settlement with those 29 states. This is Bloomberg Tech. Meta has agreed to settle a landmark teen social media case. The company says it will pay up to $18 billion over 10 years and impose new restrictions on young users, including nighttime blocks and daily use limits for under 18s, as well as using stronger age verification tools. The Facebook and Instagram parent was sued by 29 state attorneys general for alleged violations of consumer protection and privacy laws, allegations the company denies even in the court settlement filing. One of those that sued, West Virginia Attorney General J.B. McCuskey, joins us now. Attorney General McCuskey, thank you for your time. Please just start with your general reaction to the settlement and what you think it indicates.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that needs to be mentioned is that this is a bipartisan settlement. And we see so frequently in Washington how politics gets in the way of leaders taking bold actions to protect Americans and to do what is right for their constituents and the people. And so a huge thank you from the people of West Virginia. We worked a lot on this case, but the AGs, the Republican AGs in Tennessee and Kentucky, along with the Democrat AGs in California and Colorado, really led the way on this. And so it really is kind of a remarkable little window into how bipartisan politics can work. And I think your intro in terms of how the settlement broke down is incredible. I mean, this is a $17 billion global settlement that will be paid out over about 10 years, as you said.
Yes.
But I think most importantly, and West Virginia is going to utilize the roughly $115 million share that we will receive from that to very, very good use to make sure that our children and parents have everything that they need in what is a very trying time to be a parent. I am one. But the injunctive relief is really what is so remarkable here. And what you're seeing is that these tech companies are recognizing that their products can and are dangerous to children, and that they need to be doing more to be cognizant of that, to admit that, and that they have the tools to make it better. And we're really, really excited about what the future looks like for children in this country who use social media platforms, which is basically all of them, and what this lawsuit's going to do to make their lives a little bit easier.
Attorney General McCuskey, if we can just continue with the financial settlement for a moment, there is a discrepancy. The court filing says you agreed to a near $17 billion settlement. Meta is saying up to $18 billion. My understanding is that there may have been a separate or ad hoc settlement with another state, Texas. Could you shed any light on that?
So I don't actually know much about the Texas settlement. The numbers there add up. I know the AG in Texas very well. He's a really great guy. And I'm sure that he did the best he could for the people in Texas. I'm sure their settlement is incredible. And if the numbers are 17.1 and 18.1, it would make enormous amounts of sense for that $1 billion going to Texas to have been added to the number in the press release.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Did you achieve what you wanted to through settling that you would otherwise have targeted through the court system?
Yes, and I think that you can't really separate those two things. So we did achieve this through the court system. And so what we achieved occurred because we were able to put sufficient pressure on Meta during the trial process, right? So it's important to remember that this happens sort of shortly after they presented their case. And so, what they understood was that they were in a really bad position if this case went to a jury. And so just because a judge didn't make this decision or a jury didn't make this decision doesn't mean it isn't a result of the incredible work of the staffs of those four attorneys general, and interestingly enough, all the staffs of all the signatory states, right? So my team works every single day with the teams in California and Tennessee and Kentucky and California, and Rhode Island and Louisiana, you name it, right? So that our staffs are all very, very close and work together on a lot of these issues. So this is a result of the court process and would not have happened but for the fact that we were winning this lawsuit and Meta knew it.
We're live on Bloomberg Television and on Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Tech speaking to West Virginia Attorney General J.B. McCuskey. A part of the $16.7 billion settlement, $5 billion approximately, is held back by Meta, contingent on TikTok and YouTube adopting the same framework that they have agreed to. And we can get into the specifics of the framework. At this early stage, have you any indication of TikTok and YouTube's conditions and attitude towards following that framework?
So I haven't had any direct conversations with either of those two companies. I would imagine that there is a litany of litigation coming against them in the coming months and years to make sure that part of this settlement is accomplished, right? And I think it's really a novel approach. And to the folks that came up with this idea on how to sort of link these two things, what's important about that is that kids use all three of these platforms. And we believe that the injunctive relief, the things that you talked about, the nighttime caps and the hourly breaks and the 15-minute break every hour, these are really important things. And so what we want to make sure is that these other groups, these smaller companies, are implementing those same two things. So it actually gives us incentive to make sure that our children are being protected in the same ways on those platforms as they are on Meta. And it gives Meta the incentive to make sure that their competitors are also following the same guidelines that we placed in their lap with this settlement. And so it really is sort of a master class in how to settle a lawsuit and how to make sure that both sides have skin in the game.
My understanding is that TikTok as a case study faces, I think, around 15 different AG cases that are not consolidated. And YouTube and Snap, for what it's worth, I think face a smaller number than that.
Even just yesterday, Snap was sued by the great Attorney General in Pennsylvania, Dave Sunday. So, like I said before, I believe these cases are coming.
So how does that fit in, and how aggressive will this coalition of states be in saying, we've done this with Meta, we want you to follow suit in this framework that Meta's agreed to adopt?
Yeah, I would say very aggressive. I think what we see here is the success that we've had in this Meta case is a blueprint for how to be successful with other similarly situated tech companies, because the harm happening to children is the same, and it's for the exact same reasons. And so it has always been our goal to make sure that every platform protects children in the same way that Meta is going to be protecting children based upon their willingness to change their platform based on the pressure that we placed on them in this litigation.
I want to go into some of the specifics here. So the mainstay of it are limits on the use of the two platforms, Instagram and Facebook, by 13 to 17-year-olds. And in one example, there is a 2-hour daily limit where a teen can't simply exceed that. It would require parental permission, essentially, for a teen within that age bracket to use the platforms for more than 2 hours. How sort of contingent is the success of this initiative on the parents buying in to what Meta's agreed to do?
Yeah, I think very contingent. And I think in this country, one of the things that is paramount is that parents do and always will have the best interests of their children at heart, and that the government should be doing everything in its power to give parents the tools to be able to raise their children in the way that they want. And what we see with social media platforms is that there is a divide between the understanding of them between the children and their parents. I have an 11-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old daughter, both of whom use Facebook, they use Roblox, they use YouTube. And to be fair, they know way more about how to use it and what they can do on it than I do. And so it is really incumbent in this way that the government sort of bridge that gap and ensure that parents who may not be able to understand or use the technology properly are protected. Their children are protected at the exact same time. And so, what we see here is a way for parents to be able to do what it was that they wanted to do in the first place, and were in many instances unable to.
Attorney General, we have heard from Meta's chief legal counsel or legal officer this morning, CJ Mahoney. I just wanted to play a little bit of what was said.
This framework will only work if all our peers join us. Because teens move fluidly across dozens of apps, we need an industry-wide solution. We therefore call on our industry peers, TikTok and YouTube, to implement this new framework right away.
I think we need to keep talking about this part of the story. Meta is saying we want to see our peers participate in this, and they withhold some of the penalty they've agreed to pay until that's the case. Again, please, Attorney General, sign sort of the likelihood that you see in that happening.
I actually can't see the screen, but through my earpiece, that certainly sounded like an AI video. But I think it's very likely. Our office and my team of lawyers who worked on this case and I are very bullish about the other social media companies adopting this, because here's the thing. All of these things cost money, and kids always need money from their parents. And so they will, in my opinion, they will be a market aberration if they aren't providing these kind of protections to teens. And so I think in many respects it is they should want to implement all of these safety precautions, not only because they're great for kids who are their customers, but because they aren't going to want to be seen as the social media platform that is the only social media platform left that is still harming teens in the way that this lawsuit outlined. Because the theories are identical.
We're live on Bloomberg Television and on Bloomberg Radio speaking to West Virginia Attorney General J.B. McCuskey. There is an independent auditor that will monitor compliance. Will that mechanism have teeth?
Yes, that mechanism will have teeth because it will be in constant communication with the attorney generals who reached this settlement. And all of us are stalwart in the fact that these changes need to be implemented. And we are going to hold Meta's feet to the fire here because they've made some really incredible promises, some things that we think will make a difference in children and parents' lives all across this country. And if Meta is trying to circumvent what they're promised or trying to do things that get around what the settlement says, we need to continue to be the protectors for our clients who are our children and parents. So I feel very good about that part of this settlement. I think that Meta has really met us halfway here, pun intended, I guess. And their willingness to settle this case and their willingness to go as far as they have for these child protections, I think shows a willingness on their part to do all of the things that they promised. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to assume that they're going to do every single thing that they said they're going to do. But these auditors will have the power, and we will have the power to hold them accountable if they don't.
Meta, positions this framework as empowering the parents, and we've talked about, how contingent the success of this initiative will be on the parents. But for those aged 13 to 17, this is also a technology story about their access to a technology and their relationship with a technology. How do you see that changing your constituents that are within the age bracket 13 to 17?
It's interesting. One of the corollaries that I draw frequently is that, all of the people in my parents' generation watched their parents smoke cigarettes. And kids who watched their parents smoke were way less likely to smoke going forward. And I think frequently when 13-year-old kids see their mom and dad scrolling on their phone on the couch, they kind of see that as in the same way that kids who watch their parents smoke. And I think there's going to be an inherent shift in the next generation of kids where, they understand that the time suck that doom scrolling can create and the damage it causes to your relationship and to your friends. And I'm very hopeful that not just these safety precautions that we have put together here, but just the general shifts in society, we will have a generation of kids moving forward who hopefully want to get back outside, ride their bike, play baseball, hang out with their friends, play Spotlight, do all the things that we did when we were kids. And we're really hopeful that that's going to happen. And I think in many respects, we're starting to see that now.
Attorney General, this ends or closes the book on a specific piece of litigation. Just in the 60 seconds we have left, what happens next? How much does this continue at an industry-wide level?
I think it continues at an industry-wide level until all of those in the industry make the same commitment that Meta did to the children and parents of this country. And I believe that the attorney generals who filed this case are all ready to go to make sure that happens. And I'm very, very excited for the future for our kids. And I think this is a huge first step in holding all social media platforms accountable for how they have treated our kids and families as their customers.
West Virginia Attorney General J.B. McCuskey discussing a settlement with Meta, where Meta says it will pay up to $18 billion over 10 years, but is asking industry peers, TikTok and YouTube, to prescribe to the same framework that it's agreed to on changes to policy on how 13 to 17-year-olds use its platforms, Facebook and Instagram. Coming up on the program, Southern Company CEO Chris Womack joins to discuss whether America can generate enough electricity to keep the AI boom going, a really critical conversation as American sentiment towards data centers, as is in the reporting and the data, has started to sour. Financial markets interesting. We are treading water right now at the index level ahead of Nvidia earnings, which post after the market closed this Wednesday. Meta way off session highs following that settlement, but still higher by 2 percentage points. We're halfway through the program. From the city of San Francisco, this is Bloomberg Tech. Welcome back to Bloomberg Tech. A very quick check on Meta shares. Off session highs, but higher nonetheless after an up to $18 billion settlement on a landmark social media case where Meta also agrees to make very significant changes to its platforms, Instagram and Facebook, which impacts how 13 to 17-year-olds use them, with restrictions that require greater parental supervision. That's been a big story in the show. We'll go back through it later in the hour. The other stock we're watching, NVIDIA. Bloomberg Tech Equities reporter Carmen Reinecke has all the preview.
Thanks, Ed. So we're watching shares of NVIDIA, the biggest stock in the market today, as it reports quarterly earnings after the market close. And one thing that's really important here is to look at NVIDIA's performance so far this year, especially compared to the last few years, sort of since the start of the AI boom. So earlier this week, NVIDIA shares snapped a 7-day losing streak, which was its worst since 2022. And the stock, if you look at its performance this year so far to date, it's having the worst performance since 2022. It had much higher gains at this point in the last few years. This is important because earnings can be a huge catalyst for the stock, but something that we've seen with NVIDIA is that it actually has been a wait, even though the company continues to beat and raise Wall Street expectations. So the options data is showing that investors or analysts are sort of expecting a 5% swing in either direction around results today for the stock. For the last 4 out of 5 reports, that has been a negative reaction. The shares have sold off after the reports. So we'll be watching that very closely in the after hours today and through tomorrow's session after we get those numbers from NVIDIA after the bell. Back to you, Ed.
Bloomberg's Carmen Reinecke, thank you very much. The AI boom is driving one of the biggest data center build-outs in history. NVIDIA is expected to report more than $85 billion in data center revenue tonight. But powering all that compute is putting unprecedented pressure on the grid. Southern Company's CEO, Chris Womack, is joining us now to discuss. And a utility that represents some 9 million customers, one of the biggest utility by customer bases. So, Mr. Womack, introduce us to the responsibility you have right now, the scale of your utility, and then we'll get to the AI story.
No, I tell you, it's a wonderful time, wonderful opportunity where we find ourselves, and we are preparing for this growth. We're meeting this growth in a very responsible manner, making sure that as we work with data centers to support their growth, we're making sure that they bear the cost, and they do this in a very transparent kind of way. And so this is an incredible opportunity for the company, but I think it's very important that we do this in a right way that protects existing customers, but also make sure that the incredible benefits that come from these projects are provided to communities. I mean, there's a lot of activity, a lot of noise. I think sometimes a lot of misinformation about what's going on. I mean, we try to talk about what we're doing here in our territory and how we are doing contracts, how we're structuring contracts to make sure that existing customers are protected and that benefits provide, stability is provided across our business for all of our customers.
Let's go with the case study to explain the operational challenge, and that is OpenAI in Savannah, recently announced. How does something like that come about from the utilities perspective, and how do you respond to a big data center plan that goes in?
There's a lot of engagement that we have across our business, across our company, with a lot of hyperscalers, with a lot of data centers in terms of what their needs are, what parts of the country they want to locate. Then we will work very closely with the local communities in terms of what potential locations are available. And then we begin to plan and do scenarios about how they integrate with our system, with our grid. And then we just continue down through that process, and we're excited about the agreement reached with OpenAI, coming to Georgia, coming to Effingham County, right outside of Savannah. And with that announcement in terms of 25-year long-term agreement and other provisions in terms of collateral requirements, minimum bills, cancellation fees, all the things that we think are important, but also how they talked about what a good community partner they would be, yes, and the investments they will make there. So we think this is the way to do this, and do this in a very responsible way.
We will talk about the impact on communities. In the first instance, we're talking about large load contracts, what your industry calls large load contracts. How has the outlook for that type of deal changed this year going into next year in terms of the number and size that you're doing?
No, we continue to see a real significant pipeline. I mean, so we still see the demand out into the future. We have not seen any decline or any hesitation in the number of projects. And so, like I said, as we look at our pipeline, we continue to see a significant pipeline of interest and activity across our territory.
Mr. Womack, do you see a public backlash or souring sentiment in your 9 million customers towards the idea of a data center in their backyard?
Yeah, I mean, as you look across the country and you look at the conversations, you look at the political environment. I mean, clearly there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of questions about data centers in terms of the impact on electric rates and what happens on water usage and noise, and a lot of other factors, and then kind of what kind of community citizen they will be. I mean, we spend a lot of time in terms of trying to explain the implications and the value that these projects brings, not only in terms of serving those customers, but also the benefits they bring in terms of putting downward pressure on existing customers' rates. And so we try to make sure that we're very transparent in terms of how we are doing, how we're managing these projects in our company and across our business.
What's the real terms outcome been for rates? You know, the concern of everyday Americans is their electricity rates go higher, right? There are economists, even other utilities, that argue if you get the hyperscalers to cover the cost of modernizing the grid, buying at the wholesale rate, it actually is deflationary for energy prices. But what is the truth in that?
No, if you look across Georgia, look across Alabama. I mean, we have rate stability through 2028 in terms of rates being frozen. And as we look at our models, we see with these projects that they will put downward pressure on existing customers' rates. So we try to communicate that reality in terms of what we see in our models and how we operate our system and the benefits that come with these projects. And so we're trying to make sure we get that message out and tell that story to existing customers and across our territory.
The data can be confusing. You know, we've tracked forecasts where the load forecast has actually come down because there are so many projects that are duplicates, some contracted for, some never see the light of day. What are you seeing of real terms data center contracts that are happening in the real world?
No, you mean you have to risk adjust pipelines. You have to risk adjust projects that may be in a queue and may be saying what they're interested in, because you have to assume that they're shopping around to other parts of the country. And so you have to do that risk adjustment work to understand what's real. And so at the end of the day, I mean, as we require collateral requirements and what we require from these projects up front, that's a way for us to risk adjust and determine what's real and what's just placeholders. And so we don't have placeholders, we don't deal with placeholders. We deal with what we think is real and projects that we see advancing and moving through the work that we do with them. But we've got to be very vigilant in terms of doing that kind of work.
Chris Womack, Southern Co CEO, with us on Bloomberg Tech, visiting us in our bureau there at Bloomberg News. Thank you so much. We're going to keep the data conversation going later today. The electricity or power portion, it's just one facet of so much more. We have an interactive live Q&A, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific, with my colleagues from the newsroom. I'm really looking forward to that conversation with those that have led the reporting in this area. Bloomberg.com/live-QA. Coming up, we're going to discuss the landscape of private markets and the next generation of AI startups with Floodgate co-founder and partner Miura-Ko. That's next. This is Bloomberg Tech. Our next guest's investing thesis centers on what she calls the, quote, AI-pilled organization. She writes and speaks on what this shift means for the structure of startups, where new opportunities lie in the next generation of category-defining companies. Floodgate partner and co-founder Miura-Ko joins us now. What does that mean, AI-pilled?
It's a good question. What we're seeing these days is that there's a new way in which companies are going to be built and organizations will be run. And when we say that organizations are AI-pilled, most of the time people are thinking about engineering organizations using tens, hundreds, thousands of agents at a time. But we're starting to see actually what I would call almost software factories being built. So companies are not just building their own products using software, but they are actually building the factory that will actually build the software using AI. And that means everyone from sales, marketing, strategy, they are individuals also using AI. And we think that's really fascinating today.
There's two different things that jump out at me. One is speed and one is size. Like in the news flow, how many companies have been formed in the last year alone by alumni of any frontier lab or any software company where it's just a few individuals and very quickly they reach critical mass? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Some of it is about the speed, but I would say what's really interesting today is that the learning cycles for these companies is actually becoming extraordinarily fast. And so when we've talked to over 30 companies that are from 3-person startups to public companies, they include AI companies like Vercel, Decagon, Harvey, and Ramp. The big difference is that they're learning so much faster because every part of seeing the data and even acting upon that data and then learning from what was actually done is happening so much faster because it can be done agentically.
And in Floodgate's sort of pursuit of trying to understand what's happening in the real world, you went out and surveyed or interviewed quite a large number of individuals and quite a large number of companies, big and small. Talk us through why you did that, the methodology, and net, your conclusion.
Yeah, and this work is not finished by any means because what we're finding is that every month, everything starts to change. I was actually really inspired by one of our portfolio companies where the CEO, maybe like a year before everyone really woke up to the fact that coding was changing, came to me and said, I'm having an existential crisis of how our companies will be run. And when he said that, I said, well, I'm going to have to figure that out. And so I went and talked to the most AI native companies and found that not all AI product businesses are actually using AI internally. So then I decided, well, I need to know who's actually using AI internally outside of engineering. And some of the companies that really jump out to me are companies like Ramp, where they are really enabling all of their employees to leverage AI in new ways, from a salesperson to finance across the board. Vercel is another company that we saw that was very far ahead in terms of how they were also leveraging AI and enabling all of their employees to generate AI agents and use them.
So, and you know, fast forward to present day and what happens next. How does all of that work, which is ongoing, determine where you guys invest or don't invest at Floodgate?
Yeah, we believe now that, first of all, we've used this research to actually generate our own agents internally, influence the way we work. But the second piece is that there's a lot of holes, right? So agents really need, in order to operate and for employees to actually really leverage AI, there's a certain amount of context and knowledge that you have to digitally document. That is still not done extraordinarily well in most organizations. And then how do you make a regular employee comfortable using AI is still a big question. And companies like Ramp can actually build harnesses and software that enable their employees to do so, but a 3 to 10 person startup doesn't have that capability. And so there's still a lot of infrastructure and software to be built. And that really creates sort of opportunities for companies like Floodgate to come in and invest in founders who see that future as well.
And it sounds like at the earliest stages, right? You know, Ramp is a pretty mature company at this point, relatively speaking.
Yes. And this is why Ramp has the resources to be able to build those harnesses internally. And we're seeing some of these companies that are fairly large actually hire AI internal tooling teams But that's not going to last forever. Not every company is going to be able to hire those individuals. And so we believe that there will be infrastructure that is built.
And Miura-Ko, partner and co-founder of Floodgate on Bloomberg Tech. Thank you so much for being with us. Coming up, we're going to have more on that Meta settlement. It's a really important story. More to come. This is Bloomberg Tech.
This framework will only work if all our peers join us. Because teens move fluidly across dozens of apps, we need an industry-wide solution. We therefore call on our industry peers, TikTok and YouTube, to implement this new framework right away.
That was Meta's Chief Legal Officer, CJ Mahoney, calling on social media peers to follow in implementing changes after the settlement of its social media case. I want to bring in Bloomberg's Alex Levine, who leads our coverage of the social media companies. Meta reaches a $16.7 billion settlement, but actually is holding $5 billion of that back, contingent on TikTok and YouTube adopting the same framework they've agreed to. That seems a big industry story.
It is a big industry story, especially because, as we saw with several of the cases in the broader national social media litigation throughout this year, that TikTok and YouTube and Snap, which has also been a defendant on those cases, have settled. So there was this thought, particularly from the companies, that perhaps some of this, at least some of this was behind them, at least some of this would put them outside of the public eye. But I think really what Meta has done in this agreement with the AGs, if it is approved by the court, is that it has really instituted this forcing mechanism and thrust the pressure really off of Meta in some ways, and then back in an even more aggressive way on TikTok and YouTube.
This settlement was astonishing in part because it happened mid-trial during proceedings. And you look at what they have got Facebook to agree to in terms of those new policies for 13 to 17-year-olds, 2-hour limits, overnight limits, school hours limits. You've reported so deeply societally on the use of social media in that age bracket. What can you tell us about what might happen?
Well, I think that the really interesting thing to watch will be, one, how well all of these things that sound really great and very strong on paper work in practice. We have seen in other parts of the world, like Australia, where they instituted a ban on youth on social media, that there are always workarounds, and that sometimes the things that are set out on paper don't always work as well in practice. So I think that will be one thing we should watch. And then a second thing is just there's this they call it a ratcheting up of the restrictions that Meta has basically agreed to intensify the restrictions it's laid out if TikTok and YouTube get on board with it. And the two that I'll just call out, one of them is extending the overnight restrictions on overnight notifications.
Yes.
They will increase those restrictions and the time, the time frame there if TikTok and YouTube get on board. And then the other piece of it is increasing decreasing the amount of time that teens can actually spend on the app from 2 hours, which Meta will do on its own, to just 1 hour a day across the platforms if TikTok and YouTube get on board as well.
Bloomberg's Alex Levine, thank you. We have some big breaking news on the Bloomberg terminal. Russia's preparing to escalate attacks on Ukraine after concluding that negotiations for a peace deal have reached a dead end. That's according to sources close to the Kremlin. Moscow is weighing an intensification of powerful conventional ballistic missile attacks on Kyiv and different infrastructure targets based on Bloomberg's reporting and citing those sources. There are a growing number of Russian officials who have come to the conclusion that Russian President Vladimir Putin could eventually opt to use tactical nuclear weapons. That Bloomberg report just broken. Get it on the terminal and .com. Let's get back to the stock that everyone's going to be watching this afternoon, NVIDIA. Bloomberg Intelligence's Kunjan Sobhani is with us now. Let's get the BI preview and the BI estimates, Kunjan, for what we expect from NVIDIA.
Yeah, the real focus is going to be the next quarter guide. Remember, this is when the new Vera Rubin platform starts ramping. So far, the expectation is there should be no hiccups, no concerns, no initial ramp delays. So we really expect a pretty high beat in this number. Anything shy of less than expectations would be a negative. But beyond near term, I think what will matter for the stock sentiment are like three key categories. One, the vendor financing, the $500 billion worth of backstop or backing that NVIDIA has announced for financing data center build out. And second is the price hikes, how it impacts margin. Is this the only price hike we'll see, and can NVIDIA continue keeping its margins without any further price hikes?
I would just point out that the price hike idea was based on Bloomberg reporting that the server makers had notified customers that would be coming in 27 on Vera Rubin. Real quick, margins, 75%, that is not normal, right, for a chip maker, or it is?
Not normal. I mean, it's industry-leading gross margin, as much close to a software company.
Bloomberg Intelligence's Kunjan Sobhani. His research is a must-read on the terminal. Busy afternoon for him and the team at BI. That does it for this edition of Bloomberg Tech. Meta settling with those 29 states, the penalty it's paying, the changes it's making to Instagram and Facebook. That was the big story ahead of NVIDIA earnings. Recap a really critical conversation with West Virginia's Attorney General on that on the podcast. You know where to find it, on the Bloomberg platforms and online on Apple, Spotify, and iHeart. Now it's about treading water to NVIDIA's fiscal second quarter report, and that's going to have big ramifications. Look at the index level. We are treading water. This is Bloomberg Tech.